Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us all here today. Today's Shia should be the Ilu Nishmas, our dear friend Menachem Ben Yisrael Yaakov, as well as my dear aunt Rivka Bas Gavriel Tzvi, and for Zaidi, Reb Shmuel Ben Yosef Dov HaKohen, B'schos l'Refuah Shalema Bekarov Meshalom Ben Sarachel, Miriam Basara, and Yair Yeshia Bechaya Atar. Today we are on page 254 in the Or Avigdor for those who are following along. And today we're going to be talking about another topic, another subject of Bitachon. So when we started this whole parak, going back to the beginning, we broke it down understanding that there's different circumstances where Bitachon is required. And we said that the first category was matters needed in this world, the matters that pertain to this world. And we went through already the first two. The first two were one that consists to benefit your own body. So we talk about, taking care of yourself. And then we spoke about the second is for the benefit of one's livelihood and source of wealth. So we talked about that, going about earning a living. And today we're talking about the third one. The third one is regarding the subject that pertains to your wife, your children, and the other people in your world, your friends, your social circles, and how to go about with having bitachon, with living in such a lifestyle. So when I say such a lifestyle, we're going to explain it. There's two types of people. Like Chovos splits it. There's a person that lives amongst people, whether it's a wife and children, whether it's with friends, with family. And then there's someone who lives alone. Not by choice necessarily. And we're not talking about the person who does it by choice. We're talking about someone who finds himself in a position where they are just not amongst people they know in a faraway land. No family, no friends, no spouse, nothing. Like really nothing. And then we're going to talk about next week we're going to talk about the person who finds himself in the midst of having a family and children, wife, friends, parents, siblings, all that other great stuff that we all want. And there's a bitachon aspect in both of those situations that we're going to discuss, and you're going to see it's kind of a little bit. I want you to take it with a grain of salt to understand when the first one where talks about living alone. And I want you to just keep an open mind to it. People don't do it by choice. We're not talking about somebody who wants to be a bachelor, someone who wants to be single, someone who doesn't want children. We're not talking about somebody like that. We're talking about someone who just unfortunately finds himself in a place where they're living alone. It says, Avo perish achelik ashlishi. The third part of bitachon, v'heim inyone ishtoi uvanav, involves a person's relationship to the world in general, and that includes his wife and his children, ubnei beisa yukroivav, his household members, his relatives, ve'avav ve'oivav, his friends, his enemies. We're going to talk about that as well. Umakir v'miyudav, his colleagues, his acquaintances, people that he works with. V'ashal mimenu, people who are above him in the social circles, like considered more, whatever above him. V'ashal mimenu, those who are considered below him in the social circles. Mimichtam b'nei adam, among those various classes of people. This part covers afnei yosha b'tochen elakim b'hem, the proper ways of relying on Hashem in regards to these kind of people. Kasha saper, as I am about to explain, he says. V'hu she'ein adam nimla be'echem b'shnei devarim. And here's what he says. There is no person who can avoid being in either one of these two following situations. She'yeh nachri, either he's a stranger living alone, or she'yeh b'seich mishpachto ukreivav, or he is living amongst his family, his relatives, his friends, and so on. And now, like we said, we're going to talk about today about living alone. How we go about living by ourselves, whether it's in a faraway land, no friends, no family, no nothing. And that's what we're going to talk about. If he is a stranger, and he uses this word stranger, meaning he's a stranger in a faraway land, he's living alone without anyone around. And in Rav Av says over here, he's not talking about someone who by choice wants to be single, by choice doesn't want to have children, by choice doesn't want to have friends or family around him. That's someone separate. And actually he talks about that's actually a poor choice. And Hashem wants you to want to be in a relationship. Hashem wants you to want to have children, to have a family, to have all that. And it's not talking about a person who does that by choice. It's talking about people who just find themselves in that position forcefully. When he feels desolate and forsaken, Hashem will be his companion. He wants to start off by saying, if you do find yourself you're very alone, just remember Hashem is always by your side. The fact that he is alone is an opportunity for this individual to remind himself that he's not really alone, that he is with Hashem all the time. Hashem is always there with him at his side, and the fact that he feels alone, he should try to change his mindset a little bit and just thinking about Hashem in that aspect. And he should trust in him even while being a stranger in the place where he is, in a faraway land or whatever it is. And he should find consolation in his awareness that the soul is always a stranger in this world. It's another high level that he talks about. He says that a neshama, a person on this world, we're always strangers because this world is not for us. Our world is up in Shemayim. And that's on a spiritual higher level. But on a practical level, he wants to go. The people of the world are like strangers to each other and to the world. And they're only here temporary as visitors to this world. And that's where he finishes that off. Now, he's going to talk about that how this person who's living alone, how they should really feel. This man who's all alone should reflect in his mind, right? That everyone who now has relatives and family, will in short time be left a solitary stranger. What he means by that is that every person who has people, has family, has children, has siblings, has parents, at some point in their life, they are going to be left alone without anyone. You're going to leave the world, or you might be one of 10 children, and you might be the last one to pass on to Shemayim. And so at some point, you're going to be left alone. But again, that's still high level. But he goes further to say, once a person is left alone, there is no relative or son to help him. And he says, he goes further, he should also reflect upon the benefit of being relieved of the heavy burden and obligations of being with them and supporting them. When you are living alone, it's a little bit easier to deal with life. And therefore, Chavos Avos is telling us, maybe use this opportunity to get closer to Hashem. Use this opportunity to do things that you wouldn't otherwise do because you say, oh, I don't have time. Why don't you learn more? Why don't you try to do more for Hashem? You say, oh, because I don't have time. And you really don't, right? Because you have obligations. You have to go to work. You need to provide for your family. You have children. You have things to do. They get big. They need your time. And so your time is spent in a great spot, but your time is spent in a place where it's detracting from things that you want to do directly for Hashem. Now, the goal is really to want to be in a position where you have a family, you have a wife, you have children, you have friends and all that. But we're talking about over here in a situation where you are not. You're unfortunate in that situation. But he's saying thankful and fortunate that you're in a situation where you don't have those obligations. Raising children is difficult, right? Being in a relationship is difficult. And so he says over here, use that opportunity to advance yourself into being a better yid. If you don't have that right now, right? Don't say, oh, okay, forget it, I give up on everything else. No, don't give up on everything else. Use that opportunity to get closer to Hashem, to be a better Eved Hashem. Now, and next week we're going to go on to talking about how someone might go into seclusion and stuff like that for temporary times, but that'll be for next week as well. But this week's Parsha, I want to talk about this. There's this beautiful piece that I saw from Rabbi Avram Twersky. He says, he talks about actualizing potential through tests in our life. And we all have this. And we talk about this all the time, that life is about tests. Life is about how we carry on with those tests. Hashem provides us those, we like to call them opportunities. We don't like to call them challenges. But when we are faced with challenges in our life, as we all have once or twice or more in our lives, or constantly have them, how we go about dealing with that is really what makes us, right? And we talk about that. Makes us an Eved Hashem, what makes us close to Hashem, makes us a true Baal B'tachon is about that. And so this week's Pasha, we see that. And he starts, Rabbi Avram Twersky starts off talking about, back in the 1800s, you have the Russian Tsar Nicholas. And one of the things that he did over there, he wanted to destroy Yiddishkeit. He wanted to destroy the whole Jewish life as a whole. And so what he created was this concept called Cantonist. And the Cantonist concept was basically, they would go around to villages, to cities, and they would go into Jewish neighborhoods, and they would literally kidnap 12-year-old and older boys, and they would pull them into the military. Now, they would go into a special part of the military where they were under the rule of a general or army commander who was the most ruthless anti-Semite possible. And they would sit there for 20, 30 years, and the point was that they would try to beat out of them the whole concept of wanting to be Jewish, and that they eventually they assimilate into the Christian or the Catholic or whatever it was that they worshiped. And so basically they would leave Judaism and they would forget about it. And this way they would have more people that would leave Yiddishkeit and they hated it. And that's what they used to do. And so it just so happened to be during that time in St. Petersburg, there was a gathering of a bunch of the Rabbanim of that time. And they were having a conversation. They were having a conversation in Shul as to who is going to lead the Tfilos this year on Rosh Hashanah. And they were trying to figure out who it should be. And while they were talking about it, the door storms open and a group of cantonists, these young Yiddish boys who were pulled into the army, came into the room. And one of the young cantonists who led the group, he said, I myself, I'm going to daven for the Amen. I'm going to lead the Tfilos on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. And the Rabbanim were looking at him like, what do you mean? Why you? You're not part of us really. You're not a rabbi. And this boy turned around. He lifted up a shirt. And on his shirt, you saw scars from whips, from cutting, from being beaten. You can see his skeleton, how skinny he was, as they starved them. And he said, I understand pain. I am from because I want to be from. I went through this challenge. I am being forced to be a Cantonist and try to pull me away from the Jewish way. But I myself, I am challenging myself every single day to be from. And that's what I feel I deserve to be the one to lead the tefillas, because I understand it more than everybody else. And they all agreed, and he davened. And you see the same thing this week in the Parsha Vayera. You see it by that Kedah. Avram Avinu takes his son Yitzchak. Hashem commands him to take his son and to slaughter him on a Mizbeach and bring him as a sacrifice to Hashem. And without question, Avram Avinu goes and he says, yes, Hashem, and he takes him. And he takes Yitzchak, he ties him up and puts him onto the Kedah until we know the story where the Malachim came, angels came, and they cried and they said, you don't have to do it. Why did Hashem have to put Avram Avinu through that? What was the point? We all know that Avram Avinu was a huge tzaddik. He was a huge Ohav Hashem. He was so close. Nothing can change him. Hashem knew exactly what Avram Avinu was going to do. If Hashem told Avram Avinu to do something, he was going to do it, no questions asked. Why make him do it? Why put him through that pace? Why make him really why need him to actually physically carry out this command if you know what the outcome is going to be? And so the answer is very, very, very simple. There's two things. When somebody really absorbs the idea of being an Eved Hashem, when someone really absorbs the concept of we learn every single day of having full bitachon in Hashem, how do we know we internalize it? We could talk about it every single day, but if the time isn't tough and you're not pushed into a corner and you don't know if you're going to be Eved Hashem there, you're not going to be that person who's a Baal Bitachon, you don't know that. And so we see that Avram Avinu was actually given the opportunity to show that yes, it's not only lip service, that I will do exactly what I preach. And he was given that opportunity. Hashem did it as a favor for him to be able to show the world that I practice what I preach. And that's one of the beautiful things they talks about. But the Barbanel brings another concept to this. And he says that the word for test in the sign that we have is nisa. And also has the word, the root word of it is nes, not nes like as in a miracle, but the word nes, which means a banner or a sign. In Hebrew, the word nes is a sign or a banner. Rav Av wants to say that the primary purpose of Avram Avinu's actions were to show future generations of Klal Yisrael that we have to go through a degree of sacrifice in order to show Hashem who we truly are. And it's possible for us to do that. You know, the Cantonists who led the tefillah on Rosh Hashanah, he wasn't just chanting, some ancient words saying that, oh yes, I believe, I'm doing this. He was living them. He was living this in his way. He was telling his Akedah Yitzchak. That was his Akedah. He was a Cantonist. He was being forced and beaten every single day to not be a Jew, but he was still staying strong. And that is the message of this week's Parsha, Parshas Vayera. That the real faith in a person isn't proven when life is easy. We all know that. It's very easy to say you're a Baal B'tachon when life is easy. But it's proven when we're asked to give something up. It's proven when we go through a struggle. When we give up comfort, when we give up pride, when we give up convenience for something higher because we know it's right, because we want to be closer to Hashem, that is what it is. Every generation has its own Akedah. It might not be in the form of putting a person as a human sacrifice on a Mizbeach and bringing up to Hashem, because we don't do that. That's the pagan way of doing things. We don't do that as Yidden. We might not be asked to lay our children down to be slaughtered as a sacrifice to Hashem. But we are asked one thing. Leave your egos at home. Leave your fears at the door. And your self-centeredness that you have, keep it to yourself. Don't bring it out. And when Hashem says, do something, you say, Hinenu, I am here. I am here to do it. Hashem, I want to do what you asked me to do. And that's the real message of this week's Parsha. And that's the message that we learn every single week, that we learn every single day in our Shir. We need to internalize Bitachon because that is what it makes us great. Not because we say we do a Shir and Shaar HaBitachon every single day, but then when something happens, when everything gets out of hand, we don't feel the same way. You know, when you get hit with some kind of a lawsuit, you get hit with some kind of something that's bothering you, whatever it is, maybe it's financial, maybe it's health, maybe you get a phone call from the doctor and it gives you some bad news. How do you feel at that moment? How did you internalize Bitachon? How did you internalize your Akedas Yitzchak as being Avram Avinu? And that's what Avram Avinu was showing us. Avram Avinu was showing us, no, it's not conceptual that he is the biggest Eved Hashem in this world. It is actual. He actualized it by going up to the Akedah, tying up Yitzchak and putting him up there and being ready to shecht his own son. A son that Hashem promised him the whole Klal Yisrael is going to come out of. Yet he didn't know how it was going to happen at that point, because if he's going to slaughter his child for Hashem, how is Klal Yisrael going to be born? He didn't question it. He didn't. Hashem said, do it. He did it with a happy heart, with the biggest smile in the world. Thank you, everyone, for joining us all today. Have a wonderful, a beautiful Shabbos. And as always, I love you all.